The transport vehicle that carried Jin Woo away from his mother was cold and dark with metal walls that hummed with strange energy. He sat on a hard bench next to other children who had been taken from their families across the colony, and he could hear some of them crying quietly as they flew through space toward the massive Vorthon ship that waited in orbit above their world. Jin Woo did not cry, even though his heart felt heavy with sadness and fear. Instead, he remembered his mother's words about being brave and strong no matter what happened to them. He looked around at the other children and tried to be calm like his mother had taught him during their quiet years on the farm. The alien soldiers who guarded them were tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like stone and eyes that glowed with a cold blue light. They spoke in harsh voices to each other in a language that Jin Woo could not understand, but their tone made it clear they thought the human children were nothing, more than cargo to be moved from one place to another. When the transport docked with the main ship, Jin Woo felt his stomach drop as artificial gravity took hold of his body. The children were led through long corridors lined with more gray walls and bright lights that hurt their eyes until they reached a large room filled with cage-like cells where they would be kept. Each child was placed in a separate cell that was barely large enough for them to lie down, and Jin Woo found himself alone. For the first time since being taken from his mother, the walls of his cell were made of some kind of energy field that sparked when he touched it and made his fingers feel numb. A Vorthon officer came to look at the children that first day, walking slowly past each cell and studying the young prisoners with those cold blue eyes. When he reached Jin Woo's cell, he stopped and stared for a long time as if he could see something different about this particular human child. The officer, whose name was Captain Thorne, spoke to Jin Woo in broken human language, asking him questions about his family and his home colony. Jin Woo stared back at the alien without speaking, remembering something his mother had told him long ago about never giving information to strangers who might want to hurt the people he loved. Captain Thorne seemed surprised that such a young child would refuse to answer his questions. Most of the other children had already told the Vorthons everything they wanted to know about their families and their colony. But Jin Woo remained silent no matter how many times he was asked. The days passed slowly aboard the Vorthon ship, and Jin Woo learned the routine of prison life. They were given food that tasted like metal, and water that was warm and strange, but he ate everything because he knew he needed to stay strong. The other children gradually stopped crying as much, but many of them became quiet and sad in a way that worried Jin Woo during the long hours when there was nothing to do. Jin Woo would close his eyes and remember his life with his mother on the farm. He thought about their garden and their small house, and the way Hana would sing quietly while she cooked their meals. These memories made him feel warm inside even when the ship was cold and frightening. Captain Thorne continued to visit Jin Woo's cell more often than the others, asking the same questions again and again, but never getting any answers. The alien officer began to seem frustrated and angry that a child could resist his interrogation techniques when grown adults usually broke down and told him everything within hours. Other Vorthon soldiers started to notice the strange human boy who never cried or begged or tried to bargain for better treatment. They would whisper to each other when they passed his cell, and Jin Woo could sense their confusion, even though he could not understand their words. One day, Captain Thorne brought a machine to Jin Woo's cell that he said could read thoughts and emotions. He placed strange metal devices on Jin Woo's head and activated the machine, but after several minutes he removed the devices with an expression of anger and disbelief. The machine had found nothing but empty space where Jin Woo's thoughts should have been. Jin Woo did not understand how his mind could be protected from the alien technology, but he remembered his mother teaching him meditation games when he was smaller. She had shown him how to make his thoughts very quiet and still, like a calm pond with no ripples on its surface. During the long nights when the ship lights dimmed, Jin Woo would practice the breathing exercises his mother had taught him, focusing on making his mind empty and peaceful. He discovered that when he did this, the sadness and fear seemed to float away, leaving him feeling strong and centered. The other children began to look up to Jin Woo as someone who was not afraid of their captors. They would watch him during mealtimes and try to copy the way he sat straight and ate his food calmly without complaining about the taste or texture. Some of the older children started asking Jin Woo how he stayed so brave, and he tried to teach them the meditation games his mother had shown. Though he was careful not to speak about his mother directly. In case the Vorthons were listening to their conversations, Captain Thorne became increasingly obsessed with breaking Jinwoo resistance, and would spend hours staring at the boy through the energy field of his cell, muttering to himself about human psychology and interrogation techniques that had never failed before. The ship communications officer reported to Captain Thorne that strange signals were being detected in space around their ship, but the signals were so weak and encoded that they could not be decoded or traced. The captain dismissed these reports as background radiation and continued his focus on the mysterious human child. Jinwoo did not know about the signals, but sometimes late at night he would feel a strange warmth in his chest, as if someone far away was thinking about him and sending him love and strength. He would smile in the darkness of his cell, knowing somehow that his mother was still alive and still fighting to find him. As weeks passed, other Vorthon officers began to visit Jinwoo's cell to see the child who had become famous throughout the ship for his unusual resistance to their methods. They would study him like he was some kind of puzzle they needed to solve, but none of them could understand how a young human could be so mentally strong. The ship doctor examined Jinwoo several times, looking for physical explanations for his resistance, but found nothing unusual except that his brain patterns were remarkably calm for someone in such a stressful situation. The doctor reported that the child seemed to have been trained in some kind of mental discipline from a very young age. Captain Thorne decided that Jinwoo and his mother were too valuable as prisoners to remain on his ship, and made arrangements to transfer them to the maximum security prison planet called Darkness Falls, where experts in breaking difficult prisoners could work on them. Jinwoo did not know about this decision, but he continued to practice his meditation and to remember his mother love while maintaining his silence and dignity, even as the Vorthon ship carried him further away from everything he had ever known, toward an uncertain future in the darkest prison in the galaxy. The morning sun rose slowly over the small farming colony of New Seoul, casting golden light across the simple houses and green fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. Jinwoo woke up in his small bed and stretched his arms above his head like he did every morning for the past 3 years since he and his mother Hana had come to live on this peaceful world. He could smell something delicious cooking in the kitchen and knew his mother was already awake making breakfast for them. Both Jinwoo jumped out of bed and ran to the window to look outside at their little garden, where they grew vegetables and fruits that helped feed their family and some of the other colonists who lived nearby. Their house was simple but comfortable, with wooden walls and a metal roof that made soft sounds when it rained. Jinwoo loved the sound of rain on their roof and would lie in bed listening to it while his mother told him stories about brave heroes and distant worlds, though she never told him stories about their own past or why they lived so far from the main settlements where most other families stayed. Jinwoo pulled on his work clothes and ran to the kitchen where Hana was cooking eggs and bread on their small stove. She smiled when she saw him and ruffled his dark hair with her gentle hand. But Jinwoo noticed something different about his mother these days, something he could not quite understand. Sometimes when she thought he was not looking, Hana would stare out the window with an expression that seemed far away and worried, as if she was watching for something dangerous to appear on the horizon. She would check their communication device more often than before, and Jinwoo had seen her looking at maps of the nearby star systems late at night when she thought he was asleep after breakfast. Jinwoo helped his mother tend to their garden, pulling weeds and watering the plants, while Hana taught him about different vegetables and how to care for them. She was always patient with his questions and never seemed annoyed when he made mistakes, but Jinwoo could sense a tension in her movements, as if she was always ready to move quickly if needed. The other colonists often came to visit their small farm because Hana was known for growing the best vegetables on New Seoul, and for being someone who could fix almost any broken machine or tool that the farmers brought to her. Jinwoo was proud of his mother, and the way other adults respected her knowledge and skills. An old farmer named Chang Ho visited that morning, bringing a broken irrigation pump that had stopped working in his fields. Hana examined the device, carefully running her hands over its metal surface and listening to the sounds it made when Chang Ho tried to start it. She worked on the pump with tools that seemed too advanced for a simple farmer, and Jinwoo watched as her fingers moved with precision and speed that surprised even Chang Ho, who had known many mechanics. In his long life, within an hour, the pump was working perfectly, and Chang Ho left with many thanks and promises to bring them fresh fruit from his orchard as the day continued. Jin Woo played in their yard, while Hana worked in the garden, but he noticed she kept looking up at the sky more often than usual, scanning the clouds as if searching for something that worried her. When he asked her about it, she just smiled and said she was checking the weather for their plants. That afternoon, news came over their communication device that made Hana stop her work completely. The voice from the speaker talked about strange ships that had been seen in nearby star systems and warnings that all colonists should be ready to follow evacuation procedures if ordered by the authorities. Jin Woo did not understand what the words meant, but he could see that his mother understood them very well. Her face became serious, and she turned off the communication device quickly, as if she did not want to hear any more of the news that evening. As they ate dinner together, Hana seemed distracted and kept getting up to check the locks on their doors and windows. Jin Woo asked her if they were in danger, but she assured him that everything would be fine, and that he should not worry about things that grown-ups needed to handle. After dinner, Hana sat with Jin Woo on their small porch and pointed out the stars in the night sky, telling him the names of different constellations and the stories that ancient people used to tell about them. Jin Woo loved these moments with his mother when she seemed relaxed and happy. But tonight, even her stories seemed to carry a sadness that he could feel, but not understand. As Jin Woo prepared for bed, that night he heard his mother moving around the house, checking things and making soft sounds as if she was preparing for something important. He wanted to get up and see what she was doing, but sleep came quickly, and he dreamed of flying through the stars with his mother by his side. The next morning, Jin Woo woke to the sound of his mother cooking breakfast again, but when he looked outside, he saw something that made his heart beat faster. Large gray ships hung in the sky above their colony, like metal clouds that blocked out the sun. Hana came into his room quickly and told him to get dressed in his warmest clothes and to pack his small bag with his favorite things. Jin Woo could see fear in her eyes for the first time since he had known her, and he realized that the peaceful life they had built on New Seoul was about to change forever. The communication device crackled to life with urgent voices telling all colonists to remain calm and to prepare for contact with representatives of the Vorthon Empire who had come to integrate their colony into a larger civilization. Jin Woo did not understand what integration meant, but he could see from his mother's face that it was not something good. Hana knelt down beside Jin Woo and took his hands in hers, telling him that no matter what happened, he should remember that she loved him more than anything in the universe, and that she would always find a way to protect him. Jin Woo nodded seriously, though he did not fully understand why his mother seemed so scared of the ships in the sky as they waited in their small house for whatever was coming. Jin Woo held his mother's hand and wondered why the peaceful morning had suddenly become so frightening, and why his mother, who had always seemed so strong and confident, now looked like she was preparing for the worst day of their lives. Outside their window, the gray ships descended slowly toward the colony, and Jin Woo could see small transport vehicles leaving the larger ships and flying toward the settlement where he and his mother had made their quiet home for the past 3 years of his young life. Deep in the asteroid mining station called Ironhold, a man named Dae Hyun was operating heavy machinery when his personal communication device began making sounds he had not heard for 15 years. The device was hidden inside his mining helmet, where no one else could see it, and the sounds it made were so quiet that only someone trained to listen for them would notice. Dae Hyun's hands began to shake as he recognized the encoded signal pattern that meant only one thing in the entire galaxy. Commander Hana and her family were in serious danger. He quickly finished his mining shift and returned to his small living quarters where he could decode the full message in private. The message contained coordinates, locations, and a time signature that told him exactly when and where the signal had originated. Dae Hyun stared at the information for several minutes as memories of old battles and lost friends filled his mind. He had been living as a simple miner for so long that he had almost forgotten who he used to be, but the codes in the message brought everything back with painful clarity. He had been Sergeant Dae Hyun of Earth Special Forces, Ghost Division, the most elite military unit that humanity had ever created. They had fought in the Shadow War against an alien invasion that had nearly destroyed human civilization, and they had won through tactics so brutal and effective that other species still told stories about them. Dae-hyun opened a hidden panel in his wall and pulled out communication equipment that looked far too advanced for a mining station. He sent out secondary signals to old contact frequencies scattered across the galaxy, knowing that somewhere out there other members of his unit were living similar, quiet lives under false names. The first response came from a merchant ship near the core worlds where So-young had been running trade routes between industrial planets for the past 10 years. She received Dae-hyun's signal while unloading cargo containers, filled with mining equipment, but when she saw the codes, her entire body went rigid with shock. So-young had been Lieutenant Commander. So-young during the Shadow War, serving as the Ghost Division Specialist in infiltration and sabotage. Her merchant vessel was perfectly legitimate, but hidden in its cargo holds were weapons and equipment that she had saved from their old military base just in case this day ever came. She immediately changed her flight plan and sent messages to her regular customers, explaining that a family emergency required her to cancel all scheduled deliveries. The Merchant Captains Guild would fine her for breaking contracts, but So-young did not care about money when her former commander needed help across the galaxy. Similar scenes played out as more Ghost Division veterans received the emergency signal. Kyung-ho was working as a deep space explorer mapping uncharted systems when his equipment detected the familiar codes. He had been the unit communications expert and reconnaissance specialist during the war. Kyung-ho abandoned his current survey mission and began flying toward the coordinates in Dae-hyun message. His exploration ship was fast and well-equipped for long-range travel, which would make it perfect for a rescue mission in hostile territory. He had always known this day might come and had kept his ship ready for immediate deployment on a diplomatic station orbiting a neutral world. Hanul was attending a boring trade negotiation meeting when her personal device vibrated with the emergency signal. She had been working as a diplomatic aide for 5 years, using her language skills and cultural knowledge to help negotiate peace treaties between different species. During the Shadow War, Hanul had been their intelligence officer and psychological warfare specialist. She understood alien cultures better than almost any other human, and had used that knowledge to predict enemy movements and exploit their weaknesses. Her current job gave her access to classified information about military movements and political situations throughout the galaxy. Hanul excused herself from the meeting and immediately began accessing diplomatic databases to gather intelligence about Vorthon Empire movements and prison facilities. She also sent secure messages to contacts in various governments asking for favors that she had been saving for years. At a space station repair facility in the Outer Rim territories, Minho was working on fixing damaged ships when he received the Ghost Division emergency signal. He had been their weapons and technology expert during the war, specializing in explosives and electronic warfare systems. Minho closed his repair shop immediately and began pulling advanced military hardware out of storage containers that his customers thought contained spare parts for civilian ships. He had spent years collecting and maintaining equipment that the Ghost Division might need if they ever had to fight again. Within hours of the first signal, all surviving members of the Ghost Division were changing course toward a rendezvous point in the neutral zone. Their old base on an abandoned space station had been mothballed since the end of the Shadow War, but it still contained everything they would need for a major military operation. As they traveled toward the meeting point, each veteran thought about Commander Hana and the quiet life she had tried to build with her son Jin-woo. They had all known that she deserved peace after everything she had sacrificed during the war, but they also knew that if someone had taken her child, they had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The Ghost Division had sworn an oath to each other during the darkest days of the Shadow War, when it seemed like humanity might lose everything they had fought to protect. They promised that if any member of their unit was ever in mortal danger, the others would come no matter how far away they were, or how dangerous the rescue mission might be. Hana had led them through battles that no other military unit could have survived. She had made decisions that saved millions of human lives and had carried burdens that would have broken most people. They owed her everything, and they would gladly die to save her son. As the former soldiers traveled through space toward their old base, they began remembering skills and knowledge that they had tried to forget. The peaceful years had been good for healing their emotional wounds, but their training was still there waiting to be used again. Each of them checked and rechecked their weapons and equipment, making sure everything was ready for combat against an enemy that had no idea what was coming for them. The Vorthan Empire thought they had captured a simple farmer woman and her child. They had no way of knowing that they had declared war on the most dangerous humans alive, and that across the galaxy, the ghosts of Earth, Deadliest, military unit were rising from their hidden lives to remind the universe why humanity had earned its fearsome reputation during the Shadow War. The hunt was about to begin, and the Vorthan Empire would soon learn what it meant to threaten the family of soldiers who had once brought an entire alien civilization to its knees, using nothing but their intelligence, courage, and absolute refusal to surrender when innocent lives were at stake. The old Ghost Division base looked exactly as they had left it 15 years ago, when the Shadow War ended, and they had all gone their separate ways to find peace in quiet civilian lives. The abandoned space station drifted silently in the neutral zone, surrounded by the wreckage of ancient battles that had long been forgotten by the galaxy. So Young arrived first in her merchant vessel and activated the station emergency power systems that brought light and air back to the corridors that had once been filled with the sounds of soldiers preparing for impossible missions. The command center slowly came to life as computer systems that had been dormant for years began running diagnostic checks. Dae Hyun docked his small mining ship next to So Young vessel, and together, they walked through the familiar hallways where they had spent the most intense years of their lives. Every room held memories of briefings and planning sessions and quiet moments when they had wondered if any of them would survive the next mission. The armory still contained weapons and equipment that had been too dangerous or too classified to be returned to regular military storage. Ghost Division had always operated outside normal military channels, with technology and tactics that other units were not authorized to use. Kyung-ho arrived 6 hours later, followed closely by Hanul, who had taken a fast diplomatic courier ship from her station. Min-ho was the last to arrive, bringing a cargo transport, filled with additional equipment and supplies that he had collected from his repair facility. As the 5 veterans gathered in the command center that had been their home during the war, it felt like no time had passed at all. Their movements fell into old patterns as they automatically took their usual positions around the central planning table. So Young activated the main display screen and began showing intelligence data about Vorthan Empire military installations, while Hanul referenced the information with diplomatic reports about prison facilities and high-security detention centers. The news was not encouraging. The Vorthans had been expanding their territory aggressively for the past year, capturing colonies and integrating them into their empire through a combination of military force and psychological manipulation. They were known for using prisoners' families as leverage to ensure cooperation. Kyung-ho used his exploration ship sensors to scan for the emergency beacon that Jin-woo was carrying and quickly located the signal coming from a heavily fortified planet called Darkness Falls. The facility was described in Vorthan military documents as their maximum security prison for political dissidents and dangerous war criminals. Dae Hyun studied the tactical information about Darkness Falls and shook his head grimly. The planet was surrounded by defensive satellites and patrol fleets with multiple layers of protection that made it nearly impossible to approach undetected. The prison itself was built into a mountain with underground levels that extended deep into the planet. Ho began calculating what kind of equipment and explosives would be needed to break through the prison defenses, while Newell contacted her intelligence sources to gather more detailed information about guard schedules and security protocols. The intercepted communications that Newell obtained revealed something that made all of them feel cold with fear. The Vorthan High Command had decided that Hana and Jin-woo were too dangerous to keep alive, and had scheduled their execution in 3 days, as an example to other colonies that might consider resisting integration. So Young immediately began plotting courses that would get them to Darkness Falls in time, while the others started preparing weapons and equipment for what would certainly be the most difficult mission any of them had ever attempted. The Ghost Division had succeeded in impossible missions before by using tactics that no one expected, and by working together with perfect coordination. They had infiltrated enemy strongholds that were supposed to be impregnable, and had rescued hostages from situations where rescue was considered impossible. But This mission was different because they were no longer young soldiers with nothing to lose. They were older now and had built new lives that they cared about returning to. More importantly, they were fighting to save the commander who had led them through the darkest period of human history, and her innocent son who represented everything they had fought to protect. Hanul received additional intelligence that the Vorthan Empire was using Darkness Falls to hold prisoners from dozens of different species. Many of these prisoners were political leaders and military officers who had refused to surrender when their worlds were conquered. The prison was designed to break the spirit of anyone confined there using psychological torture and isolation, techniques that had been refined over centuries of Vorthan expansion. Most prisoners eventually agreed to cooperate with their captors in exchange for better treatment. But Hana was not like other prisoners, and Jinwoo had already proven that he possessed unusual mental strength that confused and frustrated his captors. The Vorthans had decided that execution was safer than risking that other prisoners might be inspired by their resistance. Dae-hyun proposed a plan that involved multiple diversionary attacks to draw away the orbital defenses, while a small infiltration team approached the prison from underground, using mining equipment to tunnel through the mountain. So Young suggested that they could use her merchant ship credentials to get close to the planet by claiming to have supplies for the prison facility, while Kyung-ho exploration ship could map the defensive installations from long-range men. Ho wanted to plant explosive charges throughout the prison system that could be detonated simultaneously to create maximum chaos and confusion during the rescue operation. Hanul thought they should also try to incite a general prisoner uprising that would overwhelm the guards. As they refined their plans, each team member felt the familiar mixture of fear and excitement that came before a major operation. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew that they had never failed a mission when they worked together. The Ghost Division had earned their reputation by accomplishing things that other military units considered impossible. They had destroyed enemy fleets from within, had assassinated alien commanders in their own strongholds, and had rescued human prisoners from facilities that were supposed to be escape-proof. Most importantly, they had never abandoned a comrade in enemy hands even when rescue seemed hopeless. They had sworn an oath to each other, and to the human civilians. They protected that no one would be left behind no matter what. The cost as they made final preparations for the assault on Darkness Falls. Each veteran checked their equipment one last time and thought about the young commander who had led them through the Shadow War. Hana had saved all their lives multiple times and had never asked for anything in return except their loyalty and their promise to protect innocent people. Now it was their turn to save her and her son from an enemy that had no idea what kind of force they had provoked. The Vorthan Empire was about to discover that some bonds cannot be broken by time or distance, and that threatening the family of Ghost Division veterans was the last mistake they would ever make. The assault on Darkness Falls began exactly as planned, with Hanul using her diplomatic contacts to send false intelligence reports about a major rebel base in a system 3 jumps away from the prison planet. The Vorthan fleet commanders immediately dispatched 2/3 of their patrol ships to investigate the supposed threat, leaving the prison defenses weakened. So Young merchant vessel approached the planet, broadcasting standard supply delivery codes, while her hidden sensors mapped every defensive installation and weapon platform that surrounded the maximum security facility. Her ship looked completely innocent, but its cargo holds were filled with enough military hardware to equip a small army. At the same time, Kyung-ho was using his exploration ship advanced scanning equipment to create detailed maps of the underground tunnel systems that ran through the mountain where the prison had been built. His ship remained far enough away to avoid detection, while its sophisticated sensors penetrated deep into the planet's surface. Dae-hyun led a team of infiltration specialists in stealth ships that were invisible to Vorthan scanner technology. They moved like shadows through the outer defensive perimeter, disabling communication, relays, and automated weapon platforms without triggering any alarms. The timing had to be perfect, because once the first phase of their attack began, the Vorthans would realize they were under assault and would call for reinforcements from across the system. The Ghost Division would have perhaps 2 hours to complete their mission before overwhelming enemy forces arrived. Inside the prison, Hana had been observing and analyzing everything around her for weeks since her capture. She noticed that the guard rotations changed every 8 hours, and that there were brief periods when certain corridors were left unmonitored by the security cameras. She had also been listening to the conversations of Vorthon personnel and had learned enough of their language to understand that she and Jin Woo were scheduled for execution in less than 48 hours. The news did not frighten her because she had recognized subtle signs that her old unit was preparing to mount a rescue operation power. Fluctuations in the prison electrical systems, guard schedules that seemed slightly different than normal, and small changes in the facility routine all indicated that someone was manipulating the prison infrastructure from outside Hana had trained her soldiers well during the Shadow War, and she knew they would not abandon her. She began preparing Jin Woo for what was coming by teaching him breathing exercises and meditation techniques that would help him stay calm during the chaos of a combat rescue operation. She disguised the lessons as simple games and bedtime stories so the guards would not become suspicious. Jin Woo listened carefully to everything his mother told him because he trusted her completely, even though he did not fully understand why she seemed so confident that they would soon be free. He had maintained his silence and dignity throughout their imprisonment and was ready to do whatever his mother asked of him. Minho had spent weeks infiltrating the prison computer systems through maintenance access ports that the Vorthans thought were secure. His electronic warfare skills allowed him to create hidden backdoors in their security protocols and to map the internal layout of the entire facility. When the time came for the final assault, Minho activated programs that caused systematic failures throughout the prison infrastructure. Emergency lighting began flickering, cell door locks started malfunctioning, and communication systems experienced random disruptions that confused and frustrated the guards. The actual penetration of the prison began when Daehyun team used mining charges to blast through the mountain rock, creating a tunnel that led directly to the underground levels where the most dangerous prisoners were held. The explosions were timed to coincide with routine blasting operations at a nearby mining facility. So Young Ship suddenly revealed its hidden weapons and began engaging the orbital defense platforms while transmitting fake distress calls that suggested the facility was under attack by a large rebel fleet. The Vorthon commanders were confused by conflicting reports and delayed their response while trying to understand what was happening. Kyung-ho team moved through the tunnel system with perfect knowledge of where they were going thanks to his detailed scans. They encountered minimal resistance because most of the guards were responding to alarms and emergencies that were occurring throughout the facility. Rescue team reached the maximum security wing just as Hana broke free from her own cell, using lock-picking techniques that she had learned during her military training. The guards who had been assigned to watch her had become complacent after weeks of her apparent cooperation and were not prepared for her sudden transformation. Hana moved through the prison corridors like a deadly shadow, using combat skills that she had hoped never to need again. The Vorthon soldiers who had mocked the quiet farmer woman discovered too late that they were facing one of the most dangerous humans who had ever lived. She fought her way toward Jin Woo's cell with fluid, precise movements that left unconscious enemies in her wake. The meditation and physical training that she had maintained during her years of peaceful farming had kept her reflexes sharp and her muscle memory intact. When Hana reached her son's cell and saw him waiting calmly for her with complete trust in his eyes, she felt a mixture of pride and sadness that brought tears to her face. Jin Woo ran into her arms, and for a brief moment she was just a mother again, holding her child. But the sound of approaching reinforcements reminded them both that they were still in extreme danger. As they moved together through the prison corridors, Jin Woo saw his mother in combat for the first time, and began to understand why the other prisoners looked at her with such respect and awe. The extraction became complicated when the Vorthon patrol fleet began returning from their wild chase after the false intelligence that Han Nul had provided. The prison commanders were calling for immediate assistance and demanding that all exits be sealed to prevent any prisoners from escaping, so Young found herself engaged in a running battle with enemy fighters, while trying to protect the escape route that Daehyun team would need to reach their ships. Her merchant vessel was equipped with military-grade shields and weapons, but was outnumbered 10-1 by Vorthon combat ships. Kyung-ho used his exploration ship advanced engines to draw away some of the enemy fighters while broadcasting false sensor readings that made it appear as if there were multiple rebel ships attacking from different directions. The Vorthon pilots became confused and began firing at shadows. As Hana and Jin Woo reached the tunnel entrance, they met up with Daehyun team, who had been fighting a running battle against prison guards who were trying to seal off the underground levels. The reunion was brief but emotional as soldiers who had not seen each other for 15 years embraced their commander. The fighting retreat through the tunnel system was intense, as Vorthon forces finally began to understand the scope and sophistication of the rescue operation that was taking place. They threw everything they had at the Ghost Division team, but the veterans fought with the skill and coordination that had made them legendary as they reached their ships and prepared for immediate departure. So Young transmitted a final message to the Vorthon prison commander. Her face appeared on screens throughout the facility, showing not the frightened colonist who had been captured weeks ago, but the steel-eyed military leader who had once brought an alien empire to its knees. The message was simple, but carried implications that would shake the Vorthon Empire to its core. Hana looked directly into the camera and spoke in a voice that conveyed absolute authority and unlimited determination, telling her captors that they had made the greatest mistake in their species' history by threatening her family. The escape from Darkness Falls was swift and devastating, as the Ghost Division used every skill they had learned during 15 years of the deadliest combat operations in human history. Their ships moved through space with precision that confused fourth-hand pursuit forces who had never encountered opponents who could coordinate their movements so perfectly. So Young merchant vessel had revealed its true nature as a heavily armed military transport and was cutting through enemy fighters with weapons that should not have existed on a civilian ship. Her targeting systems were so accurate that she could disable enemy vessels without destroying them, leaving confused pilots drifting in space. Kyung-ho exploration ship used its advanced sensors to jam Vorthon communications while broadcasting false signals that made their fleet coordination impossible. Enemy commanders found themselves giving orders to ships that were no longer there, while the real targets slipped away into hyperspace inside. Daehyun transport ship Hana held Jinwoo close to her, while the other Ghost Division veterans took defensive positions around them. The reunion between the former commander and her soldiers was emotional but brief, because they all knew the mission was not over until they reached safety. Jinwoo looked up at his mother with eyes full of questions about what he had witnessed during their rescue. He had seen her fight like someone from the adventure stories she used to tell him, but now he understood that those stories might have been memories rather than fiction. Hana stroked her son's hair gently and promised him that she would explain everything once they were safely away from Vorthon territory. She could see that Jinwoo was not frightened by what he had learned about her past, but was instead proud that his mother was someone who could protect him from any danger. As their ships entered hyperspace and left the prison planet far behind, the Ghost Division began to relax for the first time since receiving the emergency signal weeks